Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Signal with Snorlax. Today's episode, I think, is appropriately titled, Are We Dressing Up as a Bear or a Bull for Halloween tomorrow? I am technically going as like one of the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory kids. Not the one who won, Charlie. The one with the goggles or whatever. But let me know in the comments what you guys are going as for Halloween. I know everybody is kind of wanting to know right now. Do we want to be bearish? Do we want to be bullish? Well, obviously everybody wants to be bullish here, right? But the better question is what should we dress up as for Halloween? Just kind of giving, I'm going to give a brief rundown on kind of what I'm seeing in the charts. We'll talk about some strong altcoins in the market, some telling altcoins in the market. I probably will be going over a handful of things that I have touched on, realistically over the last 2 or 3 weeks, but I think they're ever pertinent on a day where, we're selling off today, right? It's weird that I feel like every time I do these shows, the market is selling off. I know some of that has to do with Thursday's return profiles in general over the last few years, but damn, man, I mean, it's like every time I do the show, we're just selling off relentlessly in crypto. But just looking at Bitcoin, we have been using the Bitstamp chart kind of as our gauge for the true trend, right? Because Coinbase and Binance obviously both have some longer wicks down. We'll see that when we visualize the ETH chart here in a second. But I've continued to feel like Bitstamp paints a very clear picture of where you want to risk on, where you want to risk off. I hate trend lines, but in this rare instance, I actually think this one could be fairly applicable to the general market. We had a market structure break. We saw a bounce, a sweep, and now we're selling off again, right? So I think if you want to be a bull for Halloween, you definitely want to see kind of this attempted re-entry into an uptrend, and to a larger extent, I would say, kind of the re-entry into this range, because we are sitting at range lows. I will say you don't want to be a bear for Halloween necessarily at range lows. But yeah, we are at range lows. You do need to see a bounce here, and probably a reclamation of this new uptrend to continue to have, I think, this bullish posture for Q4, which, when we look at crypto and we look at equities, they've kind of been giving us this push-pull dynamic as far as if you're trying to decipher what the high time frame looks like, right? Crypto, being the most liquidity sensitive asset class, is it showing signs of stress and weakness before equities do, which have been undeniably very strong? Or are equities going to eventually drag up crypto and ignite momentum in an asset class that might be struggling to catch that bid right now, but we do know tends to be kind of that later rotation sector of assets? So, which one is it going to be? And, I do think when we're visualizing Bitcoin, at this point, you can continue to view it, in my opinion, as a very binary asset. We're either going to reclaim this uptrend that we've been in, and it's going to look a lot like what we've seen the last 2 fourth quarters before eventually a big move higher, where you had like the super choppy stair step grind before higher prices, or you're potentially looking at the beginnings of a high time frame trend shift here, where if we just like invert the chart, right, a market structure break to the downside, where is support, right? I know a lot of people would be in that scenario looking to bid a sweep of this wick, and I just I'm just gonna tell you now, I do not think that would be a very smart move, just personally, but might get some sort of mechanical bounce from that should we lose this level. But I think in general, bidding here is kind of just bait, in the same way that maybe some of you guys remember me talking about, like, all right, well, if Bitcoin pops into this supply right here, back when we did this in April or May, it's almost certainly bait before higher prices. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, it basically a lockout consolidation into major upward thrusts over the course of the summer. So that sets the stage for Bitcoin. Promise I won't talk about the boring old pet rock too much today. ETH, I think, is maybe a little bit more clear of this potential trend shift. Once again, we are at support. I need to preface what I'm saying with that, right? We don't want to be a bear on Halloween into high time frame support. So I guess in theory, you could do something like where you sweep these three lows, you get some sort of double bottom here, and then you slowly grind your way back up. Maybe a breakout towards the second half of November, maybe even the first half of December. The flip side of that is we're kind of seeing our moving averages, our EMAs, our kind of our trend-based visualizations of ETH tick down or begin to kind of flip. So again, like it's not just the level that needs to hold, but you need to see this. You need to see these trends reverse soon, or else the momentum traders, which are not just people who are pressing buttons, crypto natives. I mean, high time frame allocators are going to be using these momentum indications as well. You need to be seeing a bottom fairly soon, or else in the same way that with Bitcoin, you're talking about a high time frame trend reversal potentially, there's just not that much supportive structure on ETH below the current consolidation. So, where would the low on ETH be? I don't know. I do know on ETH Bitcoin, I've kind of been looking at the equivalent of this low. But I have to say, I would be expecting at least kind of a backfill of this inefficiency or these inefficiencies if you are going to be losing this consolidation. Just off the top of my head, that's what I would say. I'm not the biggest fan of how Sol looks right now. I think this is maybe the clearest like bear case is the Solana structure. Other majors look much better than Sol right now, but just, if you are bearish and if you're trading patterns, like, is this a slow grind accumulation or is it a bear flag, right? Because if it's the first one, in theory, you can still get a deviation, which again goes back to, okay, we need to be seeing a bullish reversal here fairly quickly. Get a reclaim into that channel, and then you have price action that is looking to become increasingly more volatile to the upside. And then the flip side of that is, all right, if this is not a deviation, we have the early makings of a breakdown from like a 6 to 7 month bear flag. That will not resolve very favorably for Sol USD. So useful context, right? Do you guys think they've already tokenized bulls and bears for Halloween on the Solana blockchain? What do you think? What do you think? I don't really have any thoughts on BNB still. It's kind of honestly a perplexing structure. I will just kind of continue to say that this low should hold, which is very much confluent with what we've been saying about ETH and also Bitcoin. So the low on BNB, not the wick low, because that's, I think, way too wide of an invalidation. I always hate when traders put out a trade with an invalidation that's just like ridiculously far away from market prices. And it really doesn't help anybody at the end of the day looking to like allocate or make a trade with reasonable amounts of risk. So I would say this low here at like 1025 is probably your invalidation point, not just for BNB, but really for altcoins across the board, quite frankly, because a lot of altcoins have been trading very correlated with BNB. Shouldn't be a big surprise, in my opinion. Who does the most amount of altcoin volume? It's BNB. I don't really have any thoughts on Mantle. It looks weaker than BNB, but I could see this chart bouncing here, actually. I actually feel this is kind of one of the more... I know the chart actually looks like one of the most heinous things that you've ever seen. But this does kind of remind me of some Cardano price action from 2021. And in 2021, Cardano actually ended up bottoming here. So if we look back on a week, maybe you were right to be a bull on Halloween. I guess we'll see. I guess with this asset, you probably can use the deeper wick as an invalidation. That's not like super helpful because, again, it's like 20%, 25% away from current market prices. But structurally, if you want to be bullish on this asset, I guess you could punt here and just hope that it holds. I don't really like that as a trading strategy, though, personally. Let's talk about some strong alts, though, because there have been a handful of alts really over the last few weeks that I think have given you kind of like a sense of, all right, well, We just had a wipeout. I had a hard time figuring out what exactly I wanted to bid, but these altcoins have shown a very resilient bid. And I think that starts with Hyperliquid, obviously. Gave us a very strong move up. On the HIP3 launch, you can now trade stock perps on Hyperliquid, which is amazing. I imagine there's going to be continued speculation about an airdrop coming into the end of the year. I've been speculating for months and months and months that would be the case. So if you have been trading on Hyperliquid, I do believe that you will be rewarded. I'm saying this, if you've traded on Hyperliquid since the last airdrop, that is, I'm assuming that you're going to be rewarded. But yeah, I mean, structurally, Hyperliquid's got to move up. If any asset in crypto is going to move up, it has to be the one that has seemingly the most easily identified bid, which is Hyperliquid. I mean, traders are losing money on the exchange. Traders are unprofitable. We know this, but that does create the bid for Hyperliquid, and has created the bid for Hyperliquid really throughout the course of this year. So, if you have an asset, really the altcoin, I think with, like I said, the most easily identifiable bid, it should be moving up, or it's a statement of weakness within the market. And structurally, I think, I think you see the signs that identify with that as well. We have not broken out of these highs yet. So technically Hyperliquid is still in a downtrend. If you flip $50, then I think you likely are going to be taking out these highs and resuming the uptrend, even if it's just going to be a sweep of the highs, which I don't really expect personally. It to be just a sweep of the highs. But if you're breaking out above these highs, to me, that is contextually very favorable. However, if you're rejecting here, you do run the risk of potentially like you're buying what you hope is a higher low right here. But what you don't want to happen is that this is actually a lower high within the downtrend, bearish retest, and you're actually about to go lower. So I think kind of more clarity is needed for Hyperliquid. Some people will just say, well, the altcoin's at the level you want to bid, so bid it. And that's just not really the posture that I want to take in this market right now, where crypto has been so much weaker than equity markets. Let's talk about Zcat. Oh my God. Holy cow. Incredible chart, honestly. When we talk about altcoins with a bid right now, Zcash is the one. It swept all time. It might have made all-time high actually in like 2018. I know this isn't the full chart, but it did break the 2021 highs, which is pretty remarkable, honestly. I mean, this is a move very similar to what XRP did. Can I really expect that much more juice from this coin? I'll be honest, I'm not trading this asset, so I'm not going to have too strong of an opinion on it. People who have been very loyal holders of this, I do know that they are expecting higher pricing. I mean, holders of a coin are expecting higher pricing, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't be holding it. So I would just say, if the market's going to keep moving higher, this is a contender to just continue a raging uptrend. And I mean, it's clearly the leader. Do I want to call a top on it? No. Do I want to try to buy it up here? Also, no. But it has been, I think, a strong barometer for the rest of the market, if nothing else. And obviously, Trump coin's been very strong too. Again, kind of showing some weakness with the rest of the market. I don't think the structure is completely fugly yet, but when we talk about strong altcoins, this has been a coin that has maintained a bid. Although if you lose these lows, then I would say this entire move is going to end up getting retraced. So now we can kind of talk about equities a little bit. How do the stockbrokers want to dress up for Halloween, as a bull or as a bear? And I think that kind of starts, obviously it always starts with a handful of things, but when we look at the S&P, it has been in just this raging up move. And I think we got this additional push after we soaked some shorts in here. Maybe this is another local low. After all, the residual bid on equities has been very, very strong. I also know that bears will argue this is very extended. And I think there is merit in both arguments, to be quite frank. if you're trying to pick on a laggard to be short, it certainly in the last few weeks has made more sense to be bearish on crypto than equity markets. I mean, you had a big gap up from Nvidia earlier this week. You had a big gap up on Google yet today. Yeah, I mean, the bid is just much, much stronger on equity markets. So again, it's this push-pull dynamic of, is Bitcoin the liquidity sensitive asset class showing you what stocks are about to go through, or are stocks telling you that this train only runs in one direction and we're going to drag up Bitcoin and crypto too? And I guess we'll just have to see. But as always, we got to look at our risk proxies for equities. What are they showing us? Well, the market leaders for equities still look certainly very strong, at least as far as large cap goes. I will say Hood, which is kind of, I guess, your barometer for small cap outperformance. This does look a little bit weaker to me than the Mag 7. Looks a bit like a local complacency shoulder here. So maybe that is in the same way that, if you guys remember me talking about a few weeks ago, there was the divergence between private equity and junk bonds with the S&P, and it predicted kind of that snap down we had on the 10th of October. Could this divergence between the leading small cap with some of the leading Mag 7 equities, and let's be clear, some of the Mag 7 stocks have been showing some weakness over the last few days, looking at Meta, which was at one point down over like 10% today on the open. Are these communicating that maybe there is some weakness in equities that doesn't really show on the index level, but you can see it through some of these individual risk proxies? Let's also point out what I think is probably just as important as the VIX at this juncture, because the VIX hasn't really done anything. It held, I think, where it needed to hold. I wouldn't say it looks necessarily bullish yet. But obviously I have been kind of beating the drum both on these shows as well as publicly about VIX futures, which is the clearest visual representation of liquidity entering the market, right? I mean, it's not a coincidence, in my opinion, that VIX futures bottomed within the same realm of where the yen carry trade blow up top was, and the Q1 top. So we're trading back down into that same level. We're seeing a material reaction. I am not expecting just like full-blown risk-on conditions in all markets unless you're breaking down from this trend. And if that happens, I mean, I genuinely believe we're probably going to melt up across all asset classes. But if this continues to bounce here, which right now, not only did we bottom, here the first 2 weeks of October, we also are seeing an additional reaction after this retrace. We're clearly seeing this is a sticky spot for market liquidity in the market's current state. So I would say that about the VIX. I would say that. The last thing I'll touch on is going to be involving yields and treasuries. I don't think this is necessarily explicitly bearish. Right? Are we going to dress up as a bull or a bear for Halloween? Most people would probably guess that I'm going to dress up as a bear. I mean, after all, Snorlax is technically a bear. Do want to point that out for the record, but like Snorlax Pokemon. But I'm trying to be as impartial as I possibly can be on this episode. I hope that you guys feel the same way. But I do think if the market's going to move higher from here, you're going to need to do it despite yields moving up. Now, we've had this persistent bid on treasuries basically not quite since the tariff tantrum lows. Maybe it was basically around there. But treasuries have moved higher. And we talked about how even though treasury bonds typically bid when people are expecting recessionary conditions, it has been liquidity positive for treasuries to get bid, as we have seen markets respond in kind. So if treasury bonds, which are also, the bid on treasuries, which is coming not just from the U.S. Treasury, probably the Federal Reserve, and also buyers of U.S. national debt, including Tether, other stablecoin providers, and I'm sure so many other like foreign entities. This bid on treasuries has simultaneously been used to suppress long end yields, which have been moving lower at the same time, for really the last few months, right? You've had this very controlled downtrend, but increasingly over the last few weeks, I've brought up the possibility that, hey, maybe the 10-year is finding a bottom here. After all, we're talking about cutting rates into an economy most people would consider to be very hot, which is inflationary. So even if you're cutting rates, long end yields could still end up moving higher. And we're seeing that right now. We're seeing that right now. And I do think that we are going to see two things occur. I think TLT is going to continue to move lower from here, mainly because I liken this structure on TLT to the bottom Bitcoin had back in 2022. To me, they're almost kind of like identical twins, quite frankly. Now, I'm not really expecting, and that would place us right somewhere basically in here. I'm not expecting a move like this on treasuries because that would just be, I mean, quite frankly, that would be ridiculous, and markets would not respond well to that at all. I don't even know what would cause that. But if that did happen, that's going to mean, yes, treasuries come down, but the 10-year is going to move up. Now, markets have moved higher with the 10-year multiple times already this cycle. You can back test it. But right now, I think if we are going to move up, it is going to need to be done despite of, or in spite of, rather, the 10-year moving higher and treasuries likely moving lower. So you ask me to be a bear or to be a bull. I think it's kind of difficult to answer that question. I don't want to answer that question with Bitcoin right at range lows. If we smash through these lows on Bitcoin, on ETH, on Sol, there's not going to be a doubt in my mind you want to be a bear for Halloween. The flip side of that is, and it might not happen before Halloween, but if Bitcoin just kind of continues like this upward choppy grind, which looks a lot worse after today, but if we just do kind of like this upward choppy grind, then yes, Halloween will be past, but you can still wear your bull costume. You can still wear your bull costume, wherever that may be. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the stream. Hopefully you took some alpha away, some signal. That is all I have for you today. I think the market continues to be in this like state of purgatory. We're feigning breakouts. We feigned a breakout earlier this week. We feigned a breakdown 2 weeks ago. Are we feigning another breakdown right now? Is this just chop before we eventually move higher in Q4? I mean, that's what we've seen the last two Q4s. And then, of course, the flip side of that is lose this level. And I hate the term. I'm probably going to get memed for using it, but like lose this level and it's lights out. So we like spots where the market provides us with very binary decision-making opportunities. At least I do. It makes my job a lot easier. But that's it from us, guys. That's it from me. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Thursday, great rest of your week. Thank you again for tuning in. And as always, stay safe.